right, so we've got an interesting little update on a debate we have been having on this show about how Trump feels about the idea of potentially running against Bernie Sanders.
That's right. I mean, one of the views that we got into this is while the rest of the media is obsessed with the Lev Parnas recordings that are all about, Marie Ivanovich and all of this was buried in there where he talks about how he was actually worried about Hillary picking Bernie as her VP because of his stance on trade issues in particular. Let's take a listen to that.
That's why I think a big part of our
vice president would have been tougher.
Kane was what I couldn't.
But I think Bernie, because all those people that hated her so much who voted for me, I got 20% of Bernie vote. People don't realize that because of trade, because he's a big trade guy. He basically says we're getting screwed on trade, and he's right. I'm worse than he is, and we can do something about it. I don't know if he could have, but had she picked Bernie Sanders, it would have been tougher. It was the only one I didn't want her to pick.
I mean, it's exactly like what you've been saying, that his instincts on this are different from the RNC
He totally
instincts.
understands. Because, you heard in there where he talks about trade. He thinks that he got 20% of the potential Bernie vote because of his stance on trade, which is Hillary was totally neoliberal on TPP and on that, and that potential voters, I think he even said, he was like, Bernie shares the exact same view kind of the world I do about how American workers have been getting screwed. Obviously, the prescription's totally different. But I just don't think the Republican Party is ready for what the race will ultimately shape up and look like, because it's not going to be the same Hillary redux as it was last time, which they're very prepared to fight, and I think win against Joe Biden pretty readily, which is that you go against Biden for the corruption, the record, return to normalcy. Can you really afford to go back to normal? With Bernie, it becomes very much a fight for the future. Which type of populism, which type of, what is actually better for the workers? And ultimately, I think it becomes a real cultural referendum at that point, because that's where the margins are so different from both sides. But
it'll be cultural, it'll be generational. Yeah. Trump was able to run to Hillary's left on certain economic issues. I mean, he also really, and this is another thing the media didn't really pay attention to, but we did here, he really opened the door and undermined himself recently when he said that entitlements would be on the table, which was something that he was rock solid on last time around, saying, no, I will not cut Social Security, no, I will not cut Medicare, taking that off the table completely. So he ran to the left on that. He ran to the left on trade. Trade is one of those issues that, when I was at MSNBC, I was told in no uncertain terms about TPP that no one cared about it, which of course, maybe nobody cared about it in their social circles, but it ended up being incredibly central. And it's one of those sort of touchstones of, were you with us or were you against us, right? Were you cool with them shipping our jobs overseas and decimating our towns, or were you not? And so with Bernie, it takes that entirely off the table. On the other hand, last time Trump was basically freelancing. He was very much responsible for his own strategy. He was doing his own thing. Do you think it's going to be like that this time around, now that he's got like a real infrastructure?
I don't. I actually think the infrastructure far more hurts him than it helps him, which is a lot of these consultants are the idiots who worked for Ted Cruz, Jeb Bush, and Marco Rubio. And now they're the ones who are running the professional RNC. It's become a much more bureaucratic, professionalized campaign. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but they're very good at placing resources in Iowa, right?
Right.
But ultimately the message has to be right. I mean, you see a lot of the preliminary attacks on Bernie are just like, crazy Bernie is a socialist. Now, I mean, look, that'll actually work for a lot of right-wing boomers, maybe even middle-class boomers in some of these places, but that's not actually going to be enough in order to stop, in my view, because what it really has to come down to is culture, and on trade in particular, he has to try and say that his record on trade has been much more fulfilled promise than I think it has. He has to be much tougher on China whenever it comes to that, and needs to offer a bolder vision for manufacturing and infrastructure, as opposed to, a lot of the stuff right now is just grievance politics about, especially whenever it comes to impeachment. I mean, that's what occupies much of the campaign stump. It will fundamentally change how Trump runs against him. Ultimately, I do think because Trump is very good political instincts, I do think he will pivot to what I'm saying here, but the the pressures on him are going to be different in a way that they weren't there in 2016.
Yeah, I think that's right. There's also a media dynamic here that's interesting, which is something that you highlighted to me. As a percent, there are actually more Bernie supporters who watch Fox News than the other outlets, because CNN and MSNBC are just relentlessly dismissive and contemptful of him. Fox, in this weird way, because he's he's anti-establishment because the mainstream media is so dismissive of him. They have actually been more fair to him, and Trump even has defended him at certain points and seemed to have like this sort of soft spot for him in a certain way, in the way that the DNC rigged the primary against him.
Trump has a real respect for people like himself who have kind of like been calling it the same way for the last like 35 years. And on trade and immigration, Trump has basically said the same thing for almost 40 years.
Yeah.
I think he respects and understands that about Bernie, and he, more than anyone, sees the electoral benefit.
That the whole forces of the party were arrayed against Trump.
Exactly, yeah.
All the forces of the party are arrayed against Bernie.
He can see it. I mean, that's literally his own experience having come up in the party. So the race is just going to be so different than what the Republican establishment is ready for, and I'll be here calling it out. So.
If it comes to that, it's going to be so interesting. All right, we're going to have more for you just after this.